Good evening. It is week 10. We're on a 16-week journey to learn everything we can about Sharia crime and how to deal with it in our communities. Tonight, we're going to talk about special topics as a continuation from last time. You'll recall last time we did talk about honor violence, FGM, and child brides. Tonight, David Boris is going to take us through another set of really important special topics that we all need to know in order to fight Sharia crime. David, thank you.
Well, thank you, Dick, and it's nice being back with everybody. So why don't we get right into it with the remaining special topics for tonight. First of all, we're going to talk about grooming gangs, preparing young women for the sex trade, and Tarish, which is a rape game that's being practiced. The need for caution when selecting community partners. Law enforcement, social workers, judicial officials need to be very selective in recognizing that there are folks out there they do not want to outreach with. And then we'll take a look at the rise of Intifada in America and the fundamentalist intimidation against see something, say something programs in the hope to keep us silent. So, during our third webinar, when we discussed Sharia law on women, we looked at how non-Muslim women have been targeted by jihadists, both in America and throughout Europe. This historical obsession with jihadists have for Western women and how jihadists have used rape as a weapon to terrorize women and to demonstrate to non-Muslim Western men that they are unable to protect their women from being attacked. And we briefly looked at how fundamentalists engage in sex trafficking and in keeping sex slaves. All topics are sanctioned by Sharia. Tonight, we'll continue our discussion on the jihadist rape culture that is rapidly spreading throughout the West and how it is being virtually ignored by law enforcement and progressives. To begin, we need to consider the clash of cultures that the fundamentalists promote through strict dress codes for Muslim women and all women, as a matter of fact. So we need to revisit the verse in the Quran that authorizes the punishment or harm to any woman not properly covered and recognizable as being obedient to the rules of Sharia. Nowhere is this clash of cultures more evident than when young Muslim men have contact with young Western women. Many of you have heard about the rape attacks on 2 previous New Year's Eves in Cologne, Germany, and other European cities. And we've already covered how rape of Western women has skyrocketed, as well as child molestations and rapes in the United Kingdom. And as we'll see, the gang rapes continue and are all done in public. While many European officials blame the victims, in this case, Dr. Uni Wicken said Norwegian women must take responsibility for the fact that Muslim men find their manner of dress provocative. And since these men believe women are responsible for rape, the women of Norway must adopt to the multicultural society around them. So we turn now to the rape game, which is called Tarish, which euphemistically means collective harassment. As the caption states, a Western woman is surrounded by a group of Muslim men within a large public crowd of people and raped or sexually assaulted. As happened to a British journalist, Natasha Smith, in Egypt's Tahrir Square, and to CBS reporter Laura Logan, who was gang raped repeatedly. Where were they gang raped? Here, in the middle of a crowd of millions of people. The rape game plays out as depicted in these images. A lone Western woman is singled out for the attack in a large public gathering, is initially grabbed and restrained by a group of Muslim men, and encircled by more men to be repeatedly raped, while the outer ring of men provides security and prevents any assistance from aiding the victim, and then the outer ring exchanges places with the initial attackers to continue with the assaults. Remember, areas or countries not governed by Sharia law are considered the house of war, and non-Muslim women are considered the spoils of war, which then justifies rape and sex trafficking and the taking of sex slaves by Muslim men. And there are multiple verses in the Quran where Allah gives his permission for Muslim men to take as many non-Muslim women for a man's use as he wants, not to mention the example of Muhammad himself. A recent case of sex slavery in Colorado was reported on May 8th of last year. Note the Muslim defendant is attempting to use the cultural defense for his crimes, as we've seen attempted in previous cases. Here, Ali Turki denied abusing his housekeeper because sex with a non-Muslim woman is not considered wrong under Sharia law. Indicted in the case were Humadin al-Turki and his wife, who also had 4 children. On April 26 of this year, a Texas couple were charged for keeping a young girl for 16 years. Muhammad Tori and his wife brought the victim from Guyana when she was 5 years old. And one more example reported on September 19th of this year from California. Abdul Baseh Hashami forced a young girl into prostitution for 4 years, beginning when she was 13. In addition to the Quran, for the justification of these crimes, there are the Islamic teachers who tell Muslim men to rape non-Muslim women to humiliate them, as well as religious leaders in the mosque. This one in Quebec, Dr. Awais El Nagir, who sits on the Islamic Edicts Committee of Quebec Council of Imams. Then there's the opinion of the wives of the rape perpetrators in the United Kingdom, who label white girls filthy and by insinuation deserve to be attacked. As for grooming non-Muslim girls for sex trafficking, the steps are: young girls are given money and gifts, flattered by compliments, seduced into an adult world by drugs and alcohol, manipulated into sex with new boyfriends, coerced into sex with his relatives and friends, and finally the downward spiral of rape and prostitution continues. And then they make escaping very difficult through the abuse and torture, by threatening to harm the victim's family and to gang rape the mother. In the United Kingdom, thousands of young girls have been victimized over the last several decades. In the United States, 29 individuals were charged several years ago for their participation in 3 Somali gangs in the Minneapolis area who were targeting non-Muslim girls for sex trafficking. Then there was the warning issued by Bill Bratton when he was the police commissioner of New York City. A warning for young non-Muslim women not to take taxicabs late at night, especially when leaving a bar or club after drinking, that may put the woman at risk for being raped by Muslim cab drivers who consider such women prostitutes. Then there's the rape problem committed by Muslim Uber drivers who target non-Muslim women in college towns. Female students at Michigan State University, New Haven, Connecticut, where Yale University is located, the University of North Florida, Dallas, Texas, in Philadelphia, St. Paul, Detroit, Zionsville, Indiana, and as reported by a lone reporter on September 10, 2017, the warning how Uber drivers are in fact targeting co-eds in college towns. Then there's the United Nations report on sexual violence dated April 17th of 2017, targeting non-Muslim women for shame, humiliation, and to infect them with HIV. And they serve as the ultimate terror tool for jihadists. Domestic funding for sex slavery comes in part from the Silicon Valley Community Foundation through its funding provided to CARE, and to Islamic relief that funds and supports fundamentalist imams and activists who justify sex slavery. Then there's the professor from Georgetown University, Jonathan Brown, a recent convert to Islam, who publicly defended Sharia-sanctioned rape and sex slavery at a CARE fundraiser, attended by none other than Linda Sarsour, who attacked Brigitte Gabriel and former Muslim Ayan Hirsi Alri in the most pornographic of ways because these two women dared to speak out against sex slavery. One more recent report authored by Nikita Malik, How Modern Slavery and Sexual Violence Fund Terrorism. In the report, she makes the comments, jihadists use rape, sexual slavery, and forced marriage to bolster recruits, galvanize fighters, and to punish non-Muslim women. A clear driver behind sexual trafficking is financial gain. Modern slavery provides monetary flows to jihadist organizations, with kidnapping representing $10 to $30 million in revenue to ISIS in 2016 alone. Remember, many of the jihadists are returning to America fully trained and radicalized, greatly influenced by the culture of rape. In 2016, an upscale Michigan neighborhood in near Minneapolis was attacked by 20 to 30 Somali refugees by shouting threats and jihad to homeowners, by threatening one woman with rape, destroying property, injuring a pet, waving the black ISIS flag, all blacked out by the local media, while the Department of Justice concluded the incident was not a hate crime. The attack occurred near Lake Calhoun, received very little media coverage, while many complained about a slow police response. About the same time of the previous attack, a 5-year-old special needs child was attacked by 3 Muslim juveniles ages 7, 10, and 14 in Twin Falls, Idaho, who stripped the girl and urinated on her, all confirmed by the local prosecutor, Grant Lobes. When Lobes took the side of the perpetrators rather than the victim, the Assistant U.S. Attorney, Wendy Olson, warned local citizens not to make inflammatory or threatening statements about the 3 perpetrators or the crime itself, which may lead to, quote, a violation of federal law. A clear attempt to intimidate the public into silence. While a local TV station claimed racism, not refugee rape, was causing unrest in Twin Falls, as claimed by a local reporter who said the incident was being used to stop more refugees from coming to the area. Meanwhile, the attacks continued against very young girls, this one reported in September of last year, and 1 month later, in October of 2017, again in New Hampshire, Ahmed Abkar was arrested for sexually assaulting 2 girls and a woman ages 15 to 28. Abkar's sentence, time served, awaiting for trial. Thus, he avoided being placed on the sex offender registry, even though he had several prior misdemeanor arrests and missed court-ordered drug counseling, as well as counseling for sexual predators. In Tigard, Oregon, reported on January 15, 2018, Mohammed Hassan, age 50, indicted on 7 counts of sex abuse involving 2 girls under 14, both his students. And finally, in North Carolina, reported on November 5th of last year, a young Muslim was targeting young boys. This is our final look at jihadist ideology concerning women in this webinar program. So let's review. Muslim women suffer dearly at the hands of fundamentalists. Their rights are non-existent, considered the property of men to be used as they see fit. As for non-Muslim women, they are fair game to be punished, which helps to fund jihadists through sex trafficking, while rape is used as a weapon against non-Muslim women to humiliate and terrorize them, while telling non-Muslim men you are impotent to protect your female family members, all of which is being swept under the rug and not acknowledged. One final look at Sharia-sanctioned crimes against women: violence to discipline women in the home, female genital mutilation, polygamy, underage marriage, marital rape, pedophilia, purdah or forced seclusion of females, and honor violence and killings. We'll now turn to our next topic, to exercise due diligence in how we identify our partners. We're known by the company we keep. To this end, I've given you numerous examples of the missteps the FBI has taken over the years by partnering with and even giving awards to Muslim Brotherhood entities like CARE and its leadership. Another more recent example has been the quarterly Bridges meeting sponsored by the Department of Justice and the FBI office in Detroit. But these aren't the only examples of partnerships with Muslim Brotherhood entities that we need to be aware of. Indeed, the Muslim Brotherhood is also targeting local law enforcement through its use of deception and threats to refocus our attention from the soft jihad and to make sure we continue to ignore the nexus of it and the actions of jihadists to fundamentalist Islam. The Muslim Public Affairs Council is a front group for CARE, and of course the FBI has had repeated pressure placed on it by CARE not to cooperate. CARE also targets law enforcement training. In this particular document that I have used in the past, written by an individual in Florida, is now banned from teaching because he's considered an Islamophobic. The CARE and the Southern Poverty Law Center pursued the Culpeper County Sheriff's Office to drop former FBI agents' training program on Islam, and the program announced by John Guandolo, or performed by John Guandolo, a former FBI agent. The American Civil Liberty Union calls anti-Muslim police training course inflammatory, one that I attempted to give in Barrow County, Georgia, this past March. And CARE was very successful in Kansas to stop law enforcement training as Sedgwick County Sheriff Jeff Esther caves to pressure from CARE. And likewise, the Texas Commission on Law Enforcement bows to Muslims, rejects credits for training on Sharia and Jihad. So the Muslim Public Affairs Council, which is a front group for the Muslim Brotherhood, has two programs, one called the Safe Space Initiative, the other Building Bridges. The Muslim Public Affairs Council blueprint, or Trojan horse, to undermine local law enforcement is to abandon intelligence-led policing, to stop behavior profiling, which law enforcement can legally do, not to have any Muslim informants, and to eliminate fusion centers or joint terrorism task forces. One example of this, of their influence, was to stop the faces of global terrorism that was used to alert the public, or to gain the public support, to identify international terrorists in Seattle, Washington. No sooner was the BOLOs initiated in Seattle when the FBI came under pressure by the Muslim Brotherhood Network, along with the House Representative Jim McDermott, who demanded that these BOLOs be removed because they were considered racist and Islamophobic by targeting Muslims. Remember, the FBI and every law enforcement agency in the United States have publicized the photographs of individuals for whom there is a criminal arrest warrant, BOLOs are a vital tool to engage public support. Unfortunately, the FBI caved to the Muslim Brotherhood pressure and removed the ads. Returning to the Muslim Public Affairs Council and its desire to partner with local authorities on the war on terror, it has proposed a division of labor approach to counterterrorism, whereby local police should not be concerned with the radicalization of neighborhood jihadists and remain removed from Islamic ideology. Rather, MPAC and other Muslim Brotherhood associates are far better qualified to vet intelligence and deal with those who may become radicalized. But the real reason behind the Safe Space program was revealed by MPAC's director, Salim El-Mariyati. It should be no surprise that the Muslim Brotherhood wants to keep local law enforcement out of mosques and Islamic centers, a topic we'll explore in more detail in our next webinar. MPAC has even gone so far to say counterterrorism should be defined by them. We should define how counterterrorism is pursued in this country. To remind you, Salim al-Mariyati, here depicted third from the right, along with 5 other Muslim Brotherhood affiliates, Obama hired to influence U.S. policy. Building respect in diverse groups to enhance sensitivity training, sensitivity or bridges. Note the letter S in bridges doesn't stand for security, but for sensitivity. Anyway, the Detroit FBI office, along with the Department of Justice, hosts quarterly outreach events by invitation only, which are co-hosted by local Muslim groups. Invited to the Bridges meeting was Muthana el-Hanoudi, convicted in 2011 for conspiring with a Sunni-led insurgency against the U.S. forces in Iraq. Lena Masari, CARE attorney and leader of CARE's opposition to the travel ban proposed by President Trump, and Dawood Walid, current head of CARE Michigan, who says the #1 perpetrators of terrorism in the United States are white men. Attendees to the meeting were welcomed by Troy Mayor Dane Slater and the Chief of Police, Gary Mayer. Did you note the CARE banner at the meeting? Well, on April 29th in 2009, the FBI notified the U.S. Senate that it would no longer reach out to CARE as a liaison partner, and it would suspend all former contacts with Muslim Brotherhood group. Evidently, the Detroit FBI office wasn't on the distribution list. Unfortunately, the FBI has a troubled history of outreach to Muslim Brotherhood groups, which is hard to stop. In 2008, former FBI Director Robert Mueller presented a Director's Award to the Muslim Brotherhood jurist Iman Hanedi, who was affiliated with 2 Muslim Brotherhood groups. Former FBI Director James Comey presented the 2015 Directors Community Leadership Award to the All Dallas Area Muslim Society, or ADAM Center, for building partnership between law enforcement and Muslim community. Receiving the award here is the Adams Imam, Mohammed Majid, former president of ISNA, another Muslim Brotherhood front group. 10 years earlier, Majid was given another award by the FBI by the special agent in charge of the Washington field office, Mike Rowlands. At the time, Majid was vice president of the Islamic Society of North America, a group labeled an unindicted co-conspirator in the Holy Land Foundation trial. Then in September of 2011, the Society of Former Special Agents presented Louis E. Peters Memorial Award to Mohammed El-Bayre, a known member of the Muslim Brotherhood who was appointed to serve at the Department of Homeland Security Countering Violent Extremism Working Group. One more example, former FBI Special Agent Patricia Villafranca, who served as community outreach agent at the Joint Terrorism Task Force in Houston, spoke at Vanderbilt University in Nashville, Tennessee in September 2016 at a program sponsored by the Muslim Student Association, the first Muslim Brotherhood front group established in the United States. And finally, in January of last year, former FBI Assistant Director for the Washington Field Office, Paul Abate, visited the Dar el-Hijra Islamic Center in Virginia to assure its members that the FBI will protect them against hate crimes. This mosque is one of the main jihadist supporting centers in the United States, where Anwar al-Awlaki was the imam, where two of the 9/11 hijackers attended prior to the attack, where the Fort Hood jihadist Nidal Hassan started his radicalization, and where Ismail el-Barasi was a founding member of the mosque, who was also an unindicted co-conspirator in two Hamas trials. Of all the mosques in the DC area to showcase, the FBI picks a radical one with close historical ties to several jihadists. And they're watching who local police officers outreach with as well. Here, the Dar el-Hijra Center is courting their neighborhood law enforcement, just like these mosques are doing nationwide to convince us they are not a problem and therefore not to waste our time investigating them. We'll leave the Dar el-Hijra Center for now, but we return to it during our next webinar about mosques. Remember our Muslim America camps we looked at during the current threat webinar? They too have an outreach program that targets the FBI and local law enforcement. Although this picture might not make good for good optics, if invited, local police should attend, because maybe the only way to get inside a Muslim American compound without a search warrant. Valuable intelligence can be gathered by participating in these programs. The Muslim of America Society reaches out to Philadelphia police officers through their stomachs. I would not attend any Muslim Brotherhood-sponsored event unless it's for intelligence gathering or as part of a criminal investigation. This slide needs no explanation. Law enforcement cadets from Missouri Western State University Police Academy learn about Islam. This program, the Strong Cities Network, was announced by the Obama administration, not in Washington, D.C., but at the United Nations headquarters in New York. To qualify for grant money, applicants will have to agree to follow UN Sharia-compliant rules, which will also dictate the type of Islamic-related training an agency can receive. Also, be careful who you hire. The same Broward County Sheriff that dealt with the Fort Lauderdale jihadist attack and the mass killings at a local high school has no problem in hiring Nizar Hamaz from Care, Florida, as a deputy sheriff. In January 2017, the San Francisco Police Department, under pressure from CARE and other Muslim Brotherhood friend groups, notified the Department of Homeland Security that would no longer participate in immigration enforcement and would also leave the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force. The announcement came from Chief William Scott, Sheriff Vicki Hennessy, and Mayor Ed Lee. Similar Muslim Brotherhood pressure in Oregon for the city of Portland to leave the Joint Terrorism Task Force there by CARE and its new partner, the American Civil Liberties Union. Why? CARE objects to the surveillance of Muslims, and the ACLU objects to the security of joint terrorism operations. There currently are 104 JTTFs nationwide, and collectively they have foiled 93 jihadist attacks since 9/11 because local law enforcement and citizens have provided valuable tips to these task forces to include information from Muslims, which is being placed at risk in cities that are partnering with our Muslim Brotherhood enemy, like here. This is yet another example of why it is so important to vet employees hired for Homeland Security positions. Back in 2009, Omar al-Amari was employed by the Ohio Department of Homeland Security as its multicultural relations officer. Al-Amari authored a 40-page culture guide claiming jihad is an inner struggle for personal improvement. He has also authored a 2-page brochure called Agents of Radicalization, in which al-Amari blamed Islamic terrorism on Muslim grievances with the West. The pamphlet lists 7 Muslim Brotherhood front groups that Ohio law enforcement should partner with. Note 2 were unindicted co-conspirators as a result of the Holy Land Foundation trial, and 2 others were specifically identified in the Muslim Brotherhood's explanatory memorandum. Fortunately, someone was paying attention and blew the whistle on al-Murari. Eventually, al-Murari was fired following the investigation into his background. But not before al-Amari had already participated with Obama's Department of Homeland Security Countering Violent Extremism Working Group that developed our national counterterrorism strategy. With all this information available, the Columbus Police Department in Ohio uses care to provide diversity training to its officers as late as 2015. Muslim Brotherhood groups have learned to charm politicians while preaching hate from behind the pulpit. Political leaders must not give legitimacy to groups having subversive links to terrorism. So says a Muslim woman that we will talk about, Raheel Raza, in just a moment. This is someone that we need to pay attention to. She is president of one of the reform Muslim groups that we should partner with. Sooner or later, local law enforcement officials will receive an invitation like this one sent to the Tulsa Police Department in 2011. It was an offer from the Islamic Society of Tulsa to all Tulsa law enforcement to attend an Appreciation Day event involving food, mosque tour, and opportunity to meet with local Muslims and their leadership. Chief Charles Jordan had the announcement posted throughout the department for employees to attend voluntarily. Captain Paul Fields was a senior officer and, as we'll see, did not want to attend the event. In fact, nobody else did either. 3 weeks prior to the event, no one signed up to attend. As a result, the police chief issued a directive requiring attendance. We are directed by the Deputy Chief of Police, Webster, to have representatives from each shift attend. Please arrange for 2 officers and a supervisor or commander from each of your shops to attend at each of these times. They can expect to be at the facility for approximately 30 minutes, but can stay longer if they wish. When I present this training program in the classroom, I ask officers how the chief could have handled the matter differently to achieve voluntary attendance. The obvious answer is the chief could have told his staff when the invitation was received that he planned to attend and that he wanted as many of his senior staff officers to attend with him. This is called leading from the front. Had the chief done this, the problems that followed most certainly could have been avoided. As it turned out, Captain Fields has serious reservations about going and about directing any of his co-workers to attend the events. Captain Fields said that the initial notification was voluntary attendance. Now it is a directive. What's changed? Past invitations to religious and non-religious institutions have always been voluntary. I believe this directive to be an unlawful order, as it is in direct conflict with my personal religious convictions. Forcing me to attend a mosque when it is not directly related to a police call for service is a violation of my civil rights. And then finally, he said, please consider this email my official notification to the Tulsa Police Department and the City of Tulsa that I intend not to follow this directive, nor require any of my subordinates to do so if they share similar religious convictions. Now the ball went to the chief's court, who imposed suspension without pay for 10 days. You failed to follow the directives of your chain of command regarding furnishing officers to attend the Law Enforcement Appreciation Day held March 4th, 2011. And your actions and writings that were made public brought discredit upon the department related to furnishing officers to attend the Law Enforcement Appreciation Day. Well, as you might imagine, it went to the local courts for adjudication. Captain Fields filed a civil suit to stop the suspension without pay. The court issued its opinion. The order did not require Fields to attend because he could assign others to do so. Secondly, and most importantly, the Tulsa Police Department had engaged in community policing for more than 2 decades, participating in about 3,500 community events between 2004 and 2011. And finally, failure by the Tulsa Police Department to attend would have treated the Islamic community differently from other religious organizations that had sought TPD attendance at prior events. The court went on. As for Captain Fields' conduct by publicizing the matter, the court reasoned that every peace officer and public employee should know there is a balancing test. And the higher the rank of the employee, the less free speech he or she has. Finally, the court said, speech which discloses any evidence of corruption, impropriety, or other malfeasance clearly concerns the public. The Tulsa Police Department's interests are compelling. We have long recognized that law enforcement agencies have a heightened interest in maintaining discipline among employees. And the Tulsa Police Department must maintain public confidence that police protection will be available to the public and the police will deal impartially with all. The bottom line is, unless the information being revealed to the public involves corruption, misuse of public funds, or other matters of illegality, the public has no right to know. Case closed. My personal opinion is that the entire case could have been prevented from the start if the police chief had exercised proper leadership. Unfortunately, when I've shown this information to law enforcement executives, they fail to consider this option. The obvious question, who can we partner with? Remember, CARE and other Muslim Brotherhood groups will do everything to claim that other non-Muslim Brotherhood groups and Muslims have no legitimate standing within the Islamic community, that they do not represent true Islam, and that the majority of Muslims don't even recognize these groups. Muslims Facing Tomorrow and the Council of Muslims Facing Tomorrow, American Islamic Forum for Democracy, Muslim Reform Movement co-founders, Center for Islamic Pluralism. These are all groups that are law-abiding, patriotic, people who are working on our side. Let me give you an example. The New York Tactical Officers Association held a conference from April 26 to April 28th in 2016 in Verona, New York. CARE objected to one of the instructors, Ryan Morrow, calling him an Islamophobe and a notorious anti-Muslim conspiracy theorist. But Muslim activists came to Morrow's defense. Shireen Qadosi, editor of the Qadosi Chronicles, Dr. Zuhdi Zasser, and Raheel Raza, who I introduced to you just a few minutes ago, all publicly endorsed the training. The intervention of these Muslim reformers in support of Morrow and his training gave the New York tactical officers what they needed to counter CARE and to hold the training. Let's turn now to Intifada in America. Fundamentalist-inspired social uprisings have been occurring in America for years. The riots in Ferguson and Baltimore all have outside agitators who attempt to link domestic social issues to the Palestinian uprising against Israel. ISIS even sent a note to the demonstrators in Ferguson offering its support. We hear you and will help you if you accept Islam, and pledge your allegiance to Caliph Abu Bakr, and then we will send our blood for you and send our soldiers that don't sleep, whose drink is blood and their play is carnage. Not only ISIS, but other fundamentalist groups, to include the Muslim Brotherhood as well. During the 2016 presidential campaign, there were numerous protests against Donald Trump. Organized in Chicago by the Muslim Student Association, supported by MoveOn.org, and funded by CARE, targeting Black, Latino, and Muslim students for mobilization, advertising on Craigslist, all linked to Black Lives Matter. Promoted by activist Khalil Sabra, who has close ties with the Muslim Brotherhood, calls for a Black Lives Matter movement to declare jihad in America through an alliance with CARE and Hamas. On the eve of the 15-year 9/11 anniversary, Al-Qaeda released a video trying to recruit Black Americans to jihad. And right on its heels came the riots in the University of Berkeley, followed by reports that local police ordered to stand down by university officials. The protests were fueled by outsiders affiliated with anti-fascist movements, and refused fascism. This group received $50,000 from George Soros groups, followed by first-hand accounts of campus police sitting in their patrol vehicles taking no actions to stop the carnage, while other officers retreated. In the face of violence, a question every peace officer must confront: what would I do if given such a stand-down order? If I was told to violate my oath of office while criminal acts are being committed in my presence? In October 2017, reports started to appear that Antifa personnel were being trained in Syria, and along with other like-minded groups had met in Germany with both ISIS and Al-Qaeda to oppose Trump. There are some who feel the Las Vegas attack was in fact a joint venture between Antifa and ISIS. The Black Lives Matter link to the Muslim Brotherhood, as seen here by the CARE director and co-founder Nahad Wad, clearly indicates his group's support for the Black Lives Matter movement, as does Khalil Sabra, who stated, "You Muslim Brotherhood members are the new black people in America. If you don't stand, you will see Muslims murdered in the streets." And let's not forget where the money comes from: George Soros. Reported on October 12th of this year, Muslims ARC is the Muslim Anti-Racism Collaborative that has joined with Black Lives Matter. Remember, CARE and Soros have their fingerprints all over this alliance and will use it to achieve their fundamentalist goals. For one example of the Black Lives Matter in action against the police: a toolkit for Muslims that outlines actions to be taken in response to police brutality against Muslims. The New York Law Journal reported Black Lives Matter filed a federal civil rights suit against Clarkston, New York Police Department for surveillance of the Black Lives Matter membership and for positioning snipers at a Black Lives Matter rally. Why, you ask? Well, the movement has been very open about killing police officers, and let's not forget the killing of 5 Dallas Police Department officers on July 7, 2016, by Micah X. Johnson at a Black Lives Matter march. Reported April 12th of 2018, the 4 events were hosted by Worldview Weekend and were scheduled for Wisconsin and Minnesota, all shut down because venue managers were flooded by telephonic and social media threats of violence. To summarize the link between social unrest and jihadist group supporters and sympathizers, we've seen the alliance in Ferguson and the financial support provided by George Soros, with specific involvement of the Muslim Student Association in CARE against Trump, and the Muslim Brotherhood's stated support for the Black Lives Matter movement, and how Antifa is linked to two international jihadist groups, while Black Lives Matter initiates legal action to prevent police officers from protecting themselves, and Antifa continues to promote and use violence, while some officers are told to stand down and not protect citizens from harm. And to make matters even worse, the Clarion Intelligence Network reported on October 30th of this year of inner-city support for al-Qaeda. Such popularity for this jihadist group is evident in New York City, Chicago, Philadelphia, as well as in heavily populated areas in California and Texas. The big problem of red-green insurrection that we must deal with. I cannot help but being reminded of the chilling words of General Malik in his work, The Quranic Concept of War, that we were introduced to in webinar number 6 on the Muslim Brotherhood. General Malik said, jihadists must win the war of will to destroy their opponents' faith in themselves, their government, and their God. Isn't this exactly what is taking place by the social Marxists and progressives who are doing now by attacking our institutions relentlessly and by limiting free speech? This is an insurgency that is being fought on multiple fronts by thousands of dedicated, committed, true believers of the other side. Our last topic. Most local law enforcement agencies promote programs to the general public. If you see something, say something by alerting the police or sheriff's office. The Marxists, progressives, and fundamentalists have initiated an attack to intimidate citizens not to participate. Remember the so-called Clockboy event in Irving, Texas? CNN blew the whole matter off as a typical overreaction, this time against a young Muslim school student, Ahmad Mohammed. His crime, bringing a self-made clock to school for his teacher. When the device was plugged into a wall outlet, it started making unusual noises which caused the teacher to alert school authorities. Because Mohammed failed to comply with his teacher's instructions and became disorderly to the school resource officer, he was taken into custody and made sure he was photographed in handcuffs. This was another stage event like so many others we've seen under the banner of lawfare. Immediately after the incident, Mohammed received sympathy vote, was identified by Time as one of the most influential teens of 2015. He was even invited to the White House to meet with President Obama. But as a footnote, Mohammed's lawsuit has since been dismissed, but not before the public was told this was one more case of anti-Muslim bigotry, racism, and Islamophobia. This completes our webinar for this evening and our discussion of Tarash, grooming gangs, and sex trafficking, of how important it is to vet our partners, how social unrest is being disrupted by the Red-Green Alliance, and how See Something, Say Something is being attacked. But before we turn this evening's proceedings over to Mary, I want to compliment the state of Florida for issuing warnings about ISIS and its call for attacks against police officers. The majority of officers I have taught have no clue that they and their families have been targeted. Recall the initial call for violence was issued on September 18, 2014. Smash his head with a rock, or slaughter him with a knife, or run over him with your car, or throw him from a high place, or choke him, or poison him, or burn his home, car, or business. Make the world of the police a hell they live every moment, thinking they will be killed. Don't let them feel secure even in their home. Take out the police one by one when they leave or before they enter home. But first, gather information about them. Monitor the officer's activities and identify his shift. Get him alone on the street and kill him. Lure him into a remote area and finish him off. Terrorize by calling in the middle of the night and telling him ISIS is coming for you and your head will fly off. Our topic for next week's webinar: the religious significance of mosques, how the Muslim Brotherhood views mosques, example of mosques in the radicalization process, Muslims warning about mosques, the Sharia Adherence Mosque Survey, and lastly, examples of police willful blindness about them. I'll now turn the session over to Mary. Thank you and good evening.